Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walk of Shame. It's your man Ant Walker here to talk about UFC 240 that just wrapped. See the little recap on the broadcast is going now. Delayed it for just a second because I wanted to see what the Alexander Volkanovski interview was going to be like. Nothing too special there, so sorry I wasted a little bit of your time. But anyway, let's go ahead and start talking about what we just saw. Of course, at the worst possible time, I get some alert to change the settings on my computer. But anyway, skip that. All right, so let's talk about that main event we just saw. Max Holloway wins a unanimous decision over Frankie Edgar. Two judges scored it 50-45. One judge scored it 49-46. I scored it 50-45. I thought I was kind of conflicted initially when the fight began. I mean, I know Max Holloway isn't always known for having the fastest starts, but I almost was afraid he was a bit gun shy when it started out. And, looks like he probably was just, as my homie Mike Sloan of Sherdog said in the Slack chat, he probably was just trying to get a handle on Frankie's movement, as, of course, his movement is some of the best out there. So I really wasn't sure, and maybe it was a little mental block for myself, worried about what the lasting damage of the Dustin Poirier fight could be. I mean, that fight was just in April. It wasn't that long ago that we were looking at a bloody mess of Max Holloway, and he endured a ton of damage. So I was a bit afraid of that having a lingering effect. So that probably was more weighing on my mind than anything else. But that first round, I could see you scoring it for Frankie. I almost did. What made me score it for Max, though, was that one, Max landed those couple of really powerful uppercuts that rocked Edgar's head back. And while Edgar did land some good stuff here and there, I don't think most of his shots landed. I think most of his shots glanced off the shoulder. I think Holloway rolled with a lot of them pretty effectively. So it was difficult for me based on that to say, okay, Frankie deserves this this first round. And then that's when the Max Holloway avalanche really started. And we know when he starts moving, he doesn't really stop, and he just keeps plowing along and keeps plowing along and keeps plowing along. And then next thing you know, you're inundated, and he takes you out and he drowns you. And he did that to an extent, but not nearly to the extent that I thought he would. I anticipated that this fight was going to be a lot like Frankie Edgar, Max Holloway's fight against Brian Ortega, where it starts getting ugly, where we start having genuine concerns about the man taking the punishment in the cage, and you start looking at a corner stoppage or something of that nature. That's really what I thought was going to happen tonight, and credit to Frankie Edgar for not falling into that trap. Of course, from a skill set perspective, that does make a lot of sense that Frankie wouldn't succumb to that, because while Brian Ortega does have that, that nice knockout of Frankie Edgar, and he's greatly improved his striking game, that's not his basis. That's not what his bread and butter is. His bread and butter is getting it to the ground and getting you in some sort of wild submission. And then also he allows himself to get underwater and then pulls himself out, and you just can't really do that with Max Holloway. So Frankie Edgar, being a guy who's better on the feet, a guy who has better footwork and movement, and has some serious blinding speed, I think that's what saved him. And of course, he has a wrestling base, and he did struggle to get some takedowns, but he managed to get a few here and there. So I mean, obviously, what's next for Max Holloway is Alexander Volkanovski. That is the obvious next move. It's just a matter of, can that happen? I mean, that was pretty much the subject of the Volkanovski interview, was that we can see if Max is up for that October 5th fight in Australia. That would be a huge card that if he can make that date, he should try his best, because that paycheck will be lovely. Those pay-per-view points should be lovely. The atmosphere in that arena, stadium, should be lovely. If you're Max Holloway and you're healthy, I don't anticipate him not accepting that fight. But course, we got to see what happens with his medicals here, see if there's any injuries after the fight, see when the adrenaline wears off, and what he wants to do. But that is the obvious next step. But all right, so let's just go ahead and talk a little bit about the fight itself that we just saw round by round. All right, so as I said, the slow start for Edgar, but I mean for Max, but he edged it. He edged that round 10-9. And then the second round he picks it up. Third round, Frankie finally gets that takedown that he was desperately seeking, but it was after him getting hurt pretty badly. Like he got pretty tuned up, lost his mouthpiece even, and in my opinion, should have lost that round. And we'll talk about the commentary in particular. Joe Rogan tonight I thought was pretty bad in this fight. There were stretches where it was pretty bad, like this third round, where he was insisting that this was a hard round to score because Frankie got a takedown toward the end. Like, come on now. Frankie got pieced up that entire round, got a takedown at the end, and barely did anything while he was on the ground. That wasn't hard to score at all. There was no controversy behind that. Anybody who scores that for Frankie Edgar really needs to do a serious examination over their scoring criteria for mixed martial arts and perhaps check it up against the actual unified rules. I don't think there's any way you could score that third round for Frankie Edgar. Fourth round, Frankie did land some shots, but Max was having much more of an effect with his shots. I mean, this was almost, in a way, it was kind of like an opposite of the Dustin Poirier fight. In the Dustin Poirier fight, Max was landing a lot of volume, and he was touching Poirier, but every time Poirier touched Holloway, he moved him back. And that's kind of what we saw this time, except Max Holloway was the one doing the major damage, and he was the one turning Frankie Edgar back with the shots that he landed. The fifth round was kind of more the same. Fifth round was kind of Max settling into, okay, I'm taking this fight home. Didn't turn down the offense though, which I think is commendable in his part. He kept the volume up, kept the pressure going, and Frankie had to eat some shots in the meantime as a result. The homie Cole Shelton, the resident Judas of Sherdog.com, in the chat as well, asking, so if Cyborg does leave for Bellator and Nunes saying she wants to defend featherweight title, who will be next? Not GDR. She told me she'll never go back to 145 even for a title. Well, Cole, very good transition there, because the next fight to talk about is Cyborg versus Felicia Spencer. So everybody, if you are in the chat and you want to talk more Holloway, Frankie, you let me know. If you want to talk about any other particular fights on the card, you let me know and we will get to it. But let's go ahead and talk about Cyborg versus Spencer. And Cole, I will address your question shortly after, just kind of recapping my overall thoughts on the fight. So getting back to Joe Rogan and the commentary, this was atrocious commentary by Joe Rogan. And I am typically a big fan of his commentary. I like his commentary. I like his energy. He is obviously extremely knowledgeable, being a martial arts expert. He knows what he's talking about when it comes to fights and it comes to technique. But this one, I think he missed the boat big time. Cyborg dominated Felicia Spencer, and there's not really much other way to interpret this. I scored this fight 30-26 for Cyborg. If I'm not mistaken, I think all three judges scored it 30-27. Cyborg was beating the hell out of Felicia Spencer, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Yes, Cyborg was breathing hard sometimes. Yes, she did get tired a little bit and have to recompose herself, but she was tired as a result of mercilessly beating the person in front of her and throwing full power into every shot she had. This was not poor gas tank. This was not the result of her weight cut. This was nothing of those things. This was just her with a ridiculous power output that was nonstop. This was her landing at will. This was the equivalent of standing in front of a punching bag and going as hard as you possibly can for 15 minutes. Yes, you will get a little tired. You will breathe hard. I mean, I get what Spencer was trying to do. I mean, it was really her only hope of winning this fight was to get some clinches, maybe drag it to the floor, test those Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts against one another. That was her best bet. But, it's hell to pay if you don't get that takedown. It is hell to pay. And Felicia Spencer paid. She paid it tonight with extra. Left a tip also. That was a beatdown she endured. I give all the credit in the world to her for having such a remarkable chin, for having the resolve to just keep going, because, man, there are a lot of professional fighters in the world that would have decided to just stay down, to take one of those hits and say, I think I'm good, fam. I think I'm good. And they wouldn't be wrong for it either, because that was a hellacious beatdown that she endured. I was stunned at how grossly Rogan was overselling everything that Spencer did. Yeah, she got a couple clinches, stalled the action for a little bit. Did she do any damage in there? No. Yeah, she landed a few punches here and there. Did it slow Cyborg down in any way, shape, or form? No. Did Cyborg even react to a lot of it? No. With the exception of that elbow in the first round that cut her forehead, there really wasn't much reaction from Cyborg for anything that Spencer did. So how anyone, especially someone that's knowledgeable as Joe Rogan, would be confused about that, I don't know. I don't understand it. But I mean, I think we're all entitled to bad nights. God knows how many fights Joe Rogan has called, how much time he spends in front of a microphone between the UFC, but stand-up comedy and his podcast. You're going to have off days. I'm no Joe Rogan as a podcaster or a commentator. I've only done one play-by-play gig, and but I know I have bad days sometimes in front of this microphone. So what happens? It's not the worst thing in the world, but tonight it was pretty bad. It was pretty damn bad. All right, Cole. So let's I'm gonna address your question here about Cyborg leaving for Bellator, and who does Nunes defend that title against? I do think Cyborg does leave for Bellator. That's something that I am firmly believing she is going to go to Bellator. I think for several reasons. One, obviously, the good relationship she's maintained with Scott Coker. Scott Coker made her a star originally. Let's remember that. Let's remember when we first heard and really understood who Cris Cyborg was Scott Coker wasn't too far away from that, was he? Well, Elite XC? I know he wasn't in charge of that, but did a lot of co-promotion with Elite XC, and then Strike Force, of course, made her a bona fide star. It just makes all the sense in the world on that level for her to want to go there, especially when she has these back and forths with Dana White that at this point it's just ridiculous. She's made the UFC a lot of money. UFC's made her a lot of money. Get over it. Everybody get over their shit and make it work. But I do think that some of those wounds just didn't heal quite as well. I mean, just as recently as the last couple of weeks, Dana White was making it very clear that Cyborg didn't want the rematch with Amanda Nunes, and she's not hungry for it and all this other stuff, where when we know, okay, this is just a play for money. This is a play for negotiation. This is to try to get PR against get the public opinion against Cyborg. We could tell this, but the Cyborg is so in control of her own brand that I don't think anybody sincerely bought that. And she does an excellent job of addressing fans and making her face known, especially here in Southern California. I've seen her plenty of events that weren't UFC necessarily or just around, and she's always about her brand. I've got every time I've run into her or her camp or whatever, I keep getting these damn Cyborg laptop stickers. So I got like a stack of them in my bedroom now. They're just sitting there. So she's always on a campaign. So for that reason, makes sense for her to go to Bellator. Also, the sponsorships. Do you know how much money Cyborg could make with her own sponsors on the trunks and not settling for, a $40K Reebok payoff per event? And I'm not even sure if that's I guess that's what her payoff would be. Now I don't know if that's different now that she's not champion. But I mean, come on now. She could stand to make a lot of money in Bellator, a whole lot of money in Bellator without having the personality clashes that she has clearly with the UFC. And then also there's a new group of women for her to beat up on to round out her career. Julia Budd being one of the marquee names in women's mixed martial arts that she has not fought. So it makes sense that she goes there to take on Julia Budd and, you know, smash another field of women at featherweight until she calls it a career in the near future. Makes a lot of sense to me. But what I think happens with the featherweight title for the women in the UFC, I'm in agreement with Rob Iman in the chat here. I think it goes away. I've been saying this for a while, man. I thought when Amanda Nunes knocked out Cyborg, I thought that was the beginning of the end of the women's featherweight division. And then to have in the same night the weird toe eye poke from Megan Anderson on Kat Zingano, I think that just sealed the deal right there too. That was just another thing that said, okay, this division probably is not going to stick around. And then you have Megan Anderson get stomped by Felicia Spencer. And then for Felicia Spencer to have such a bad night, like if she came away with the winning this, obviously, there's no doubt about her fighting Nunes next. That would just make all the sense in the world, but that's not going to be the case now. I don't think there are too many people clamoring to see that fight, even though she showed herself able to take a hell of a shot, even though she's shown herself to have such an incredible granite chin and a will to keep competing. I don't think anybody really wants to see Nunes beat her like that. Because here's what that looks like, in my humble opinion. My humble opinion, I think Nunes gets the finish in that because this was more Berserker Rage Cyborg. This was pre-Jason Perillo Cyborg that we saw here tonight. And I know Jason Perillo was in her corner, but this was what she used to fight like before Perillo took over her coaching. Under Perillo, she's shown a lot more patience. She's shown herself to be a lot more measured. She's shown herself not to just go out there and just swing full power into every punch, into every kick, and blitz someone to death within 45 seconds. Like that's not the game that she fights under Perillo. But this looked like Cyborg of old, and I think that's the only reason why Spencer was able to survive. Yes, of course, that means that she's throwing more output. She's got a lot more output that's coming her way, and she's got to cover up more, and she's going to take a few more shots and all that. But it also means the shot selection can get rather poor. It also means that when Spencer desperately needs the clinch, that means the clinch is there because Cyborg is rushing in, throwing those shots, as opposed to hanging back, being patient, and selecting them carefully. So that, I think, is something that Nunes would not be doing. Nunes would be much more the tactician, much more the patient wait and see sort of approach, and then pounce. She showed it against Holly Holm just a few weeks back. I mean, she tried to show it against Ronda Rousey for as long as that lasted. Amanda Nunes is very careful about her shot selection. So yeah, that with Nunes in front of Spencer, what happens is that Nunes carefully picks those shots, but those shots put her down. Yeah, so that's how that goes. So yeah, I'm with you, Rob. The women's featherweight division is probably going to get shut down if you don't have Megan Anderson as a viable contender. The UFC was very high on her, and she has not panned out to their expectations. Felicia Spencer just taking this beating that she just received. Even if Kat Zingano was able to get the win over Megan Anderson, or if you ran that back and then Zingano gets the win, and then you could say, okay, well, Zingano's the last person to beat Nunes, but at this point, that angle's kind of dried up. I don't really think there's anything left at featherweight unless you want to blow up another bantamweight. Unless Ketlin Vieira decides that she wants to eat a couple cheeseburgers. And Cole mentioning here in the chat that he spoke with Jermaine Durand to me, and she has no intention on going back to featherweight, even for that title shot. She'd rather take it at bantamweight, apparently, and I'm not mad at her about that. So I say goodbye, women's featherweight in the UFC. Cyborg will probably end up Bellator next time you see her. So let's see here. I'll address Rob. I see you talking a little Holloway, Volkanovski. We'll go back to that, but this card was not an easy one to get through attention span wise, so we don't really have a whole lot to talk about. But Jeff Neal, Nico Price was one of the highlights of this card. It was an insane fight, and it came at the perfect time because I'm pretty sure I wasn't in the arena, obviously, but I would be very surprised if that crowd was getting very restless. Reading the talk on Twitter, reading the talk on the Sherdog Slack chat, it was pretty rough for a lot of people to get through this one. It was pretty rough. And to have such a long stretch without it wasn't even just the fact that that there were so many decisions. It wasn't that. It was the nature of the fights themselves. A lot of clinching against the fence, a lot of stalled positions, a lot of just grinding fights that didn't really offer a lot aesthetically. So yeah, Jeff Neal and Nico Price came at the right time. Yeah, Jeff Neal, man. This is a guy to watch. I believe this 6 wins in a row for him. This is a guy to watch. If you are not watching Jeff Neal at this point, please get on board. This man is athletic as hell. He is very technical. He has a high fight IQ. He reads the action in the cage so well. He's such a good striker. You see some of his transitions on the ground tonight were spectacular. Like, Jeff Neal is the truth. That is a guy who I have really high hopes for, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he does next. So as far as the action itself in that fight, and Nico Price tried his best to make it a Nico Price fight, to make it some wild, crazy brawl that he just thrives in. And Nico, it seems to be one of those guys who's a bit of a knucklehead and got a screw loose, and he just likes to fight like that. It was very interesting to see him try to force that fight on Jeff Neal. But here is how good Jeff Neal is from a mental standpoint in this. He recognized that. He recognized that Price is going to try to force this brawl. And as he was initially trying to shut that down in the first round, and he did his best to keep it contained, he realized he was not really landing a whole lot. He realized he couldn't get any real combinations off without letting Nico engage in that brawl and having him stand still and just trade. He approached the brawl with intelligence. That is the mark of a very dangerous man. Whenever you have a fighter who is willing to brawl but does it with intelligence, you are in front of a dangerous man. I'm reminded of Jason Gaethje in that. Jason Gaethje is one of those guys. Tony Ferguson's another one of those guys that will stand in front of you and be ready to brawl, but they do it in such a smart way. They do it in such a way to where it goes beyond a brawl. It just becomes high violence technically. That's really what it is. Just high technical violence as opposed to just a pure out brawl. So he let Price get into that pure out brawl so his chin would stand still long enough for him to land enough shots to put him down. Incredible work. Incredible work by Jeff Neal. So Rob Iman, who's always dropping who should be next in the chat. Always, Rob, I appreciate that. Always keeps me on my toes right there. Suggesting Jeff Neal versus Michael Chiesa. Man, that sounds like a fantastic fight. And like you said, that would be a great test of the grappling that Jeff Neal has to offer. What I'm more curious about is not necessarily his grappling, but how his striking looks in the face of such grappling. That seems to be more the question mark with a Jeff Neal Michael Chiesa fight, but I like it. I like it a lot. Also suggesting Nico Price take on James Vick for his welterweight debut, I'm not mad at that at all. I'm not mad at that at all. I think for James Vick too, that's a good fight to make. You've got a guy who will obviously engage you on the feet. Also a guy that you probably could knock out. But it's also not so high on the ladder that it might be biting off a little bit more than you can chew. And for Nico, it's a good way to like reestablish his, the hopes around him by knocking off a name such as James Vick, even if Vick is on rougher times as of late. I do like the sound of that a lot. So shout out to you, Rob. That was a good call right there. All right. Olivier Oban Mercier versus Armand Sarukian. I mean, yeah, it's a fight. It was okay fight. Yeah, I think we can start letting go of the notion that OMA or OAM is going to be a big star for Canadian MMA. I know they were trying to sell that on the broadcast, but everything about this fight says that's not the case. Yeah, it was a he was a Canadian guy fighting in Canada, high up on the card. But yeah, that could get the crowd behind it a little bit. But at the same time, man, he was on a 2-fight losing streak, and they put him up against a guy who was kind of one of the more interesting prospects out now, who's extremely well rounded. Like, that's not a pairing that suggests that the UFC is really trying to build OAM. As someone brought up on the Sherdog live chat, the trenches that I do every week with my man Jason Burgos, someone brought it up that hey, maybe this is just a random booking by the UFC. It was a Canadian guy, he was available, they threw him on a Canadian card, and there was nothing more to it. And at this point, it makes a lot of sense. The UFC needs, excuse me, I'm so exhausted. Sorry. The UFC they need so many bodies on so many of these cards. Well, we're in what did they say on the broadcast? It was like a 9-week stretch of UFC events every week. So at a pace like that, you need bodies. You need bodies. Okay. And it's kind of rare too that the UFC even has the chance to appropriately book people as far as their hometowns are concerned. So yeah, OAM is available. He's Canadian. All right, throw him on the card. Doesn't matter against who. Just throw him on the card. This, if you are in the camp that Olivier Oban Mercier is the second coming of GSP, or the new hat to hang the Canadian MMA scene on, no, I'm sorry, that ship has sailed. I can't buy that at this point. Not with a pairing like this. Not with the result like this. So yeah, that is what it is. Marc-Andre Barriault versus Krzysztof Jutko. I scored it 30-27 for Jutko. The judges saw it a split decision, 29-28 two ways, 28-29 the other way. It was a close fight, but it's really nothing really we could say too incredible about this. I mean, Jutko fought a smart fight. He negated a lot of Barriault's power. Excuse me. And a lot of his boxing by kind of jamming him up and clinching him, and then he kind of kick him out at range. And it was either one or the other. He was either all the way in or all the way out. So, yeah, I mean, that was a veteran performance by Jutko. That's kind of what I expected. That's why I picked him. I thought he would win based on doing something like that. I seriously doubted that Jutko would go in there and just have a rock'em sock'em robots with an up and comer like Barriault. This didn't make any sense. But I think the place that this was put on the card shows a lot about the strength of this card. These guys are what, fringe, top 20 guys, maybe top 15, maybe for Jutko. Let me pull up these rankings really quickly. Let me see if Jutko is even in the top 15. No, it's not even in the top 15. So you're talking about top 20 guys or top 20 guy in Jutco. I probably wouldn't even put in the top 20, but you're talking about guys who don't have a number next to their name when the UFC is announcing them, and they are on the pay-per-view main card. And this was the style matchup you kind of would have expected. Yeah, I think this is the sort of card it was. Like that was not a pay-per-view main card worthy thing right there. That did not belong behind a paywall for any reason. All right, let's see what else we got. Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize I was so tired. Yeah, apologize. Um, so Alexis Davis versus Viviana Raju. This was kind of a war of attrition right here. It was a matter of whether Arajo's gas tank would last longer than Alexis Davis's chin. That was the story of this fight, and looks like um, it improbably made it to a decision. Um, I thought that it would end up being a late finish by either one of them. Just a matter of who was going to pit her out first. And somehow or another, they both made it to the bell. I mean, Davis's face was battered up, was completely battered up. She was getting tagged at will. It was pretty bad. I mean, and despite the fact that the commentary was selling how tired Arojo looked and stuff, I'm not quite sure that was her just being tired necessarily. I think she took that second round off. Granted, she picked a dangerous way to do it. If memory serves me correctly, did she not take Alexis Davis down, but then ended up reversing, getting the position reversed, and ended up on bottom? Like, I wouldn't want to rest by trying to wrestle Alexis Davis. The way she was outstriking her, I'd rather just kind of stay on the bike. And while the movement might be tiring, I think she would have been good enough to just avoid anything Davis was throwing at her. So yeah, Robin with you. Alexis Davis being cut would not be the worst thing in the world. The problem is, though, this is a flyweight fight. Alexis Davis is a 125er. You don't have a lot of them. So I anticipate they keep her around just for that, just because you need the bodies. All right. Let's see. Akeem Dawoodu versus Yoshinori Hori. That was a fight. Oh, yes, that was a fight. This was this was the second finish of the night. One of three finishes of the night, if I'm remembering correctly here. Man, Dawoodu is nice. That dude is really nice. It's always good to see a guy who's so new show patience and kind of get through some adversity and figure things out on the fly. That is always good to see. And whether or not he necessarily is thinking through this himself, or it's his coaching pointing out certain things and he goes out and executes whatever they told him to do, it doesn't matter. The ability to adjust on the fly is crucial at the highest levels of the game. And that's something you typically do not see out of guys who are relatively new. That's not typical. To see him get dropped in that first round, even if you want to question whether it was more of a balance thing or the power, to see Dawoodu get his, he's throwing those naked leg kicks and he was getting countered left and right. But to see him then adjust himself in that second round and start picking up momentum, and then the picture perfect setup for the finishing sequence, what was nuts, was absolutely nuts, man. I'm really looking forward to what Dawoodu does next. And now I know part of the appeal to Dawoodu has been, the African heritage, and that's been a consistent theme with Kamaru Usman, Israel Adesanya, and Francis Ngannou, a couple other guys that were born in Africa, or at least have, first generation immigrants with their parents being from Africa or whatever. And I'm not sure where he lies on that. I'm not sure if he came to Canada as a child, or if his parents came to Canada and then he was born. I can't remember on that. But I do know he was flying that Canadian flag in there. I do know he, in his post-fight speech, was talking about being the next Canadian star. We should not be looking at Olivier, Oban, Mercier at this point. We should be looking at a guy like Dawodu. It's just case in point. Like, there's so much more upside there. And featherweight is ripe with names that you would love to see this man fight. You would love to see this man fight. I'm not mad to see him. You know, I know this deviates from the classic Joe Silva winners versus winners, losers versus losers. I wouldn't be mad to see him up against a Mercier Bektik next. I think that fight makes a lot of sense. So I do want to see Dawodu take a step up in competition. I want to see what he has to offer for some of the rougher challenges that lie ahead at featherweight. Now, and I say Bektik for a reason. Like, I'm not trying to rush him. Dawodu is not getting the next title shot. Dawodu doesn't need to be challenging Max Holloway anytime soon, or beating down Calvin Cater's door. And like, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is a guy like Mercier Bektik, who seems to have been struggling to keep his position in the featherweight rankings. Put him up against a guy like that and see what happens. Because even at this point, if he loses, it's not the end of the world. This guy young enough and new enough that he can just retool later on. So I like that fight for him a lot. Cool Breeze in the chat saying, please discuss Gervonta Davis and Nunes at the end of the show if possible. I'm sorry, Cool Breeze. I did not watch the Tank Davis fight. I did not watch that. If you want to hear some boxing talk, the two places to go to for this fight in particular, I know, would be Mixed Combat Radio with my homie Matt Hunter. Matt Hunter MCR on Twitter. You can follow him. And then my homies Kendrick and Matt Wells of the Slip and Dip podcast. So those are the two places I would suggest you go for that. I will be watching those fights tomorrow, so I won't be totally out of the loop. But tonight was all about UFC pay-per-view because I was scoring the fights live for SureDog.com. So I couldn't have a second screen up with the boxing and then try to follow it all. It would have been a little bit too much for me. And also I was writing at the same time too, so I couldn't divide my attention three ways. Rob Bauman suggesting Dawodu versus Alex Caceres next. Damn it, Rob, I like the way you think. That sounds good. Like, that's the level that I'm talking about Dawodu should be fighting next, because that would still be a step up in competition. Caceres, similar to Mercier Bektik, is a guy that people had some high hopes on, didn't quite pan out for one reason or another, and is kind of hangs around the higher levels and can go ahead and get down with a lot of those guys, but doesn't quite get over the hump. That makes sense to me. Let's see here now. Tommaso, I see you in the chat asking about some upcoming fights, and I want to talk about some upcoming fights. So please re-ask me that in a little bit. We're gonna get through just the rest, a little bit of this card. I'm not gonna hang around on this long because there isn't a whole lot I really want to talk about on the prelims of this, but there is a lot in the world of fights that I want to talk about. And please, if y'all have any questions about that garbage ass BJ Penn matchup, drop them things because I'm ready to go off on that. So yeah, please, I want all that smoke. All right, let's go talk about Gavin Tucker versus Sungwoo Choi. Tucker looked good, man. Tucker looked really good in this fight, and I was happy to see that. Last time we saw Gavin Tucker, he was at the hands of a merciless beatdown from Rick Glenn, with Cal Cardinal, officiating that one. He did an atrocious job that night. To his credit, he did a much better job tonight. So I salute to him. He made some good calls here for the evening. But anyway, I I really did like that Gavin Tucker was healthy, back on the ball, got himself a finish, his first finish in the UFC, and that Rick Glenn fight did not ruin him, because that is the sort of fight that can ruin a young prospect like that. Alejandro Pantoja and Davidson Figueiredo. Why? Please, someone tell me, why the fuck was this so low on the card? Please explain to me why a fight that is, upper echelon in the flyweight division. Now, keep in mind, now it looks like they're keeping the flyweight division. They're signing guys. They just picked up a couple flyweights. Dana White's talking about Cejudo defending his belt against Benavidez, and this is real. Looks like flyweight's sticking around. If flyweight is sticking around, why are you putting these guys so low on the card when they're this high ranked? Please explain to me why Krzysztof Jotko and Marc-Andre Barriault is on the main card of a pay-per-view, and they are probably out of the top 20. Yet you're going to have, what should be a number one contender fight between Pantoja and Figueiredo buried on the prelims. And yes, I know the prelims were on ESPN, so yeah, that's all fine and dandy. But a lot of times, let's keep in mind how stupid some people are. And I know I come back to this a lot. A lot of people are very stupid. If you tell them it's important and you show them it's important, they think it's important. When you see a fight between the number 3 and number 4 flyweight in the UFC this low on the card, does it seem important to you? Does it seem important to you when it is the curtain jerker for the televised prelims, and it is followed immediately by a prospect who was savagely beaten about a year and a half ago in Gavin Tucker? Does that make any sense? I'm really curious about it. Does that make a bit of sense? So if the UFC is actually committed to flyweight, be committed to it. Display these guys, show these guys. Wouldn't this have been a fantastic fight to lead into the pay-per-view or open the pay-per-view? The UFC knows what they're doing when they put these two together. This was going to be an action fight. We all know this. Anyone worth half a grain of salt that calls themselves a fight fan or fight expert or an analyst or a journalist or a media member, or anybody who watches the UFC and knows anything about these fighters would tell you this was going to be a beautiful pairing. It did exactly what everyone thought it would do, yet you buried it there. So if flyweight is actually going to stick around, treat it with the importance that it deserves. Treat it like you're going to get fights like that, because ever since this whole flyweight has been on the brink of extinction talk that we've had going on, they have consistently delivered. And that's not to say they weren't delivering before that. They are consistently delivering, yet you bury them. If you make this, part of the pay-per-view card, or you make this higher up on the ESPN card, it feels more important to the casual fight fan, because the casual fight fans know the important fights go last. There's a reason why nobody is there in the damn building for the prelims. There's a reason why if you go to a major boxing match, no one gets there into the co-main event. There's a reason why. So if you put it then, when there's no one around, how important is it really to you? So anyway, just briefly, Jillian Roberts versus Sarah Frodo. Jillian Robertson showed incredible work on the ground, incredible composure and patience and strategy to one up Frodo, who is a legit BJJ black belt, to one her up on the ground and get a TKO finish. Shout out to her. Eric Koch in his welterweight debut. Defeats Cal Stewart. I agree with one of the judges who scored at 30-27. The other two scored at 29-28. So, yeah. All right. So, no more recap of UFC 240, at least for the bottom fights. Anything else in particular you want to talk about, just throw it in the chat. And we'll just do some general fight talk. And, Rob, I see you, as always, calling for everyone who lost to be cut. My man, you are a savage. But I do agree some of these people should be cut. But yeah, you are a savage trying to cut everybody. So let me scroll back up a little bit to Maso. Mark, I did not forget about you, homie. Put in the chat my thoughts on Jeremy Stephens versus Yair Rodriguez. I like that fight a lot. But why do I thought it was Zombie. Am I tripping? Wasn't that No. I think you're right. You're right, because it was, let's see, Yair Rodriguez. Let's see. Yair Rodriguez is, yes, okay, yeah, Jeremy Stephens from Mexico City. I like it. The fight itself sounds good, but it's one of those other deviations from winners versus winners, losers versus losers. I tend to like the old Joe Silva model for matchmaking, even though I'll deviate from it myself sometimes. I just don't really see the point in deviating from it this time. I don't really see the point in it. Like Jeremy Stephens, correct me if I'm wrong, is he coming off of back-to-back losses? Am I correct in that? He lost the Zabit fight. And let's see here. Let me look this up. No, I was at the Zabit fight, so I definitely remember that. And what did he? Yeah, Aldo before that. Yeah, so he's lost 2 in a row. It doesn't make a lot of sense in that regard to have a prospect like Rodriguez to fight a guy who's on a 2-fight losing streak, even if that guy is Jeremy Stephens. From an action perspective, I like the fight. From an action perspective, I really do like that fight. But because if Stephens wins, then what do you do with Yair? Like, does Stephens move anywhere near the title picture? No. Like, so kind of what's the point? Really, what's the point of that one? Yeah, I say they probably should have just done the Zabit versus Yair fight. That's just get that one out the way. And I know we talk about killing contenders off a lot of times, but I think that one makes a lot of sense because the guy who wins that gets a little closer to Max. I mean, we got Volkanovski next for Max, so he's occupied. He's going to be occupied in that. Yeah, that just, and you got Calvin Kattar who needs a guy. Yeah, Jeremy Stephens just and Yair Rodriguez just doesn't make all the sense in the world to me. For that reason, but the action of the fight should be interesting. I'm also curious, that fight being in Mexico City, and I believe it's the main event too. I believe that's the main event, if I'm not mistaken. If not, it's an appropriate main event with Yair being the guy that want to be the Mexican star in Mexico City. So, but fighting in Mexico City, especially when you're talking about a 5-rounder, is always going to be something. That's always going to be a very interesting one right there, because the pollution, because the elevation. Nobody really wants that Mexico City fight. Let's put it that way. Tommaso saying, I see Ortega versus Zombie happening. That is a pairing I like. I like that pairing a lot too. That one makes sense. I know Ortega is coming off his loss, but he had such a good run that that makes sense to put him in there with a guy on the rise like Zombie. And it wasn't that long ago that Zombie got knocked out, so they're not too dissimilar as far as their trajectories at the moment. So why not? Tomas also saying Josh Emmett wants Aldo at Madison Square Garden. Guess he said this in an interview with my man James Lynch. So shout out to James Lynch of The Score. Always putting out good work. Always has a rack of interviews. So definitely check out his work as well. Emmett and Aldo, I like that. I like that a lot too. That's a good one from a style perspective too. That should be very, very interesting. Yeah, Aldo's loss against Volkanovski wasn't the worst thing in the world. And I know once again it's a deviation from winners and winners, losers and losers, but yeah, I'm not too mad at that. Calvin Kattar versus Zabit. Yeah, I mean that is one of the cool things about featherweight. You can kind of mix and match these guys. And I know I've said this before. Featherweight is one of those divisions like welterweight, like lightweight, where you just kind of pick and choose who, and you can just throw their names in a hat and pull out two randomly, and it's probably going to be a good fight. So that's a good one. All right, so let's see what else we got here. MMA on point in the chat. I will assume that it is my man Jason Hartley. I will assume it's you, Jason, who is manning the company account right now, agreeing with me about my rant of flyweights being buried on the card. Also suggesting that Bagel Boss could make flyweight. Please explain to me why this clown Bagel Boss seems to always there's always this representation of idiocy, lunacy, stupidity, and just buffoonery that finds its way in mixed martial arts. Why is it when some random dumbass who probably isn't worth the effort it takes to type his name seems to always get welcomed with open arms into our sport? Why? When Jose Canseco is the laughing stock of sports, you know, come on, take this MMA fight. You know, I'm consistently amazed that the malcontents, the rejects, the fuck ups, the goofballs, and the losers of society seem to always find a home in mixed martial arts. And I know the fight world is filled with a bunch of malcontents, a bunch of maniacs, a bunch of losers and everything else, a bunch of crazy people, essentially. But I mean, is there a limit to this? This moron went into a bagel shop and went on a rant about how girls on dating apps reject him, and got in the face of a guy who was like 6'4", and then was crying bloody murder when he got tackled and held down. You know, and then there's also going on to say, like, yeah, if I get mad at a black guy, I'll use the N-word. Like, these are the fucking clowns that we seem to welcome with open arms in the sport. It is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. That being said, if man, at this point, it honestly wouldn't surprise me if somebody signed him to a contract and he went and actually had a fight. It wouldn't shock me one bit. We've seen a lot of stupid things. That would just be the next in the line. All right. So what else? Okay. Jason denying that it's not him. Saying it's never me. I know it's not you, Jason. I know. All right. Rob Byman saying, looking forward to Covington versus Lawler next weekend. Covington versus Lawler does sound like a very interesting fight. Now, I am not sure if I will be able to do a broadcast from that because, as you guys know, I have a pregnant wife. We are having our gender reveal party next weekend. The one time there's an early UFC, I could be done with all this stuff early, and I'll be out doing husband duties. So I probably will not be able to do one of these, but I'm more than willing to do one when I get back home or the next morning. So tweet me at Ant Walker MMA. We'll talk. Just let me know what time you guys prefer, and I'll try my best to make that happen. Now let's see here. The Covington Lawler fight does sound very interesting, and I'm kind of different minds in this. I find it very possible that Covington goes for that shot like Ben Askren did. Lawler shrugs it off, dumps him on his head, and pounds his face into the canvas. That is so possible. But at the same time, Covington puts on such a pace that you have to be concerned about that. We saw the pace of RDA stop Robbie Lawler in his tracks and completely nullify everything he did. Covington has that ability. Covington did that to Dos Anjos himself. So he definitely has the ability to do that. I think it's going to be more so about who makes the first mistake. If Covington comes in sloppy, he's getting cracked. If Lawler has a lapse in concentration, even for a split second, Covington gets a hold of him and makes him miserable for an extended period of time. Tommaso saying, I feel like if Kobe makes it out the first round, he could grind on a win. Lawler is dangerous in rounds 1, 4, and 5, and he generally takes 2 and 3 off. Kobe fights recklessly on the feet. It makes sense. Like, we're also talking about Kobe Covington, who got outboxed by Damian Maia in the first round of their fight. He got outboxed by Damian Maia. Not a good look. But if he survives, if he is able to survive, that's when Covington does what he does. If he's able to endure that onslaught or just nullify it, jam him up to where he can't really extend those punches, just get in his face and be careful about getting in his face. That's where he can excel, because I think if he does that for a round, I think it just snowballs. I think it just avalanches. I think it like reminds me of the Woodley and Usman fight, where Usman was able to just pounce on Woodley pretty quickly, and Woodley never got out of that first gear. He was never allowed to because Usman was in his face the entire time. That is what Kobe Covington can do to Robbie Lawler. Let's see. I'd rather see Tommaso saying I'd rather CM Punk versus Cub Swanson than the Bagel Boss versus a flyweight. Yeah, I'd rather a lot of things other than the existence of Bagel Boss. What a fucking clown. But anyway, let's see here. Thoughts on Fedor versus Rampage. Yeah, this is supposed to be the Bellator Rising co-promoted event for New Year's Eve, and that's an appropriate main event for that sort of spectacle. I mean, I'm okay with it, I guess. Like, if we're gonna keep dragging Fedor's corpse out there to do some fights, and if Rampage pretends to care enough to just show up for the fight, fine. It's fine. You know, of course, this fight would have been a massive deal if this were, say, 10 years ago. But it's 2019. Like, whatever. We'll watch it. You know, it'd be fun. That's kind of it. I don't expect much out of it. You know, if we're putting Fedor against some sort of young heavyweight prospects or something, then we got a problem. But Rampage, Fedor is an appropriate level of competition for both of them at this point. Do you have picks for the Bellator Featherweight Grand Prix? Mine is Borix. Borix is definitely a sleeper pick of the Grand Prix. I'm kind of feeling AJ McKee on this one. I'm really feeling AJ McKee on this one. Just seeing the improvements with him, like AJ McKee is what the way they built up AJ McKee is what they should have did with Aaron Pico, who, of course, friends and training partners, or his former training partners, still friends, at least from what McKee tells me. So I do like that. I do like that they brought him along pretty slowly. I mean, the Pat Curran fight was like, okay, the first, like, oh, this is a real name this guy's fighting. And granted, he didn't smash him, but he did very well. And he showed himself able to adjust on the fly, something very important for the younger guys to be able to do. And he did that, passed that test with flying colors. So, what's his fight his first fight in the Grand Prix? Is that Georgie Kakarian? I think Georgie Kakarian is a tough dude too. That's a really tough guy. So I do want to see what AJ McKee looks like in this tournament. And I think he probably will be my favorite to at least make it to the finals. I don't know about getting past Pitbull, but even if he did, it wouldn't shock me too much. It wouldn't shock the hell out of me. So Tommaso saying, I appreciate the honesty about Fedor and Rampage. Very true. If you could great fight for 2 minutes and they'll both get tired. Exactly. I would not be too ecstatic to see the championship rounds in that one. Oof. Also asking, do I see Juan Archuleta getting the upset over Pitbull? From a skill perspective, not really. But what I do see though is I see Pitbull distracted with everyone else in the damn tournament. I was at that media day in LA, man, where like the whole room was challenging Pitbull. Darian Caldwell getting into a shouting match with him. AJ McKee decides, to jump in it as well. AJ McKee, of course, product of the Body Shop in, I believe that's in Lakewood or Long Beach. Product of that team, and like that whole team is in the building, and they're shouting all sorts of stuff at Pitbull, and Pitbull is standing there ready to fight the entire room. And poor Esther Lynn and Amy Kaplan, longtime MMA photographers, they're trying to get shots at this, but they're trying to get out the way because it looks like it's about to be a brawl in there. And the poor staff in Morton Steakhouse in Burbank look petrified because they didn't know how to handle a room full of MMA fighters. So I think things like that can be distracting. Things like that can take your focus off of the task at hand. And not to say that Pitbull has problems with focus necessarily, but he's an emotional guy. He's a very emotional guy. An emotional guy can take their eye off the ball if something else is grinding their gears. In a scenario like that, Archuleta could do something. But 100% focus Archuleta versus 100% focus Pitbull, I got to go with Pitbull on that. Also asking, who should Leon Edwards fight next? I'd like to see him versus Woodley. I've been calling for Woodley versus Leon Edwards since Woodley dropped the belt to Usman. I've been calling for quite some time. Rob saying give Edwards Masvidal. No, do not. If you are Jorge Masvidal, that is the dumbest fight to take. That is a huge risk for Jorge Masvidal, considering the star power that he has built up with the knockout over Darren Till, piecing up Leon Edwards backstage at that event, and then the flying knee on Ben Askren. Masvidal is at an all-time high popularity-wise. They, high, extremely high ranking. I don't remember him being this close to a title shot since, he had the Strikeforce title shot against Melendez, but since being in the UFC, I guess it was like 2017 when he lost to Damian Maia, and then Maia ended up getting the shot against Woodley. So if you're Masvidal, don't mess up this opportunity by fighting a guy you don't have to fight. So it just that one doesn't make sense to me. That's more so. Now the fight itself would be very good. It would be an entertaining fight. But if you're Jorge Masvidal, you have no business in that fight. You have no business there. Like it's just not smart to take that one. That's also agreeing with me. And Rob saying if Covington wins, he gets the next shot. Yes, he should have gotten the next shot. He should have got the shot when Till got the shot. He should have got the shot when Usman got it. Like it doesn't make sense that, and screw everyone that made these decisions for having me defend the honor of Colby Covington, but he should have had his title shot. I see Walt Harris versus Overeem. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that, and that's a tricky one for Harris. That's a really tricky one for Harris. Harris definitely hits hard enough to put Overeem out, but man, he can get reckless sometimes. He can get reckless, and Overeem is a guy. If you get reckless on him, he will make you pay. And Overeem, since his chin issues have been glaringly obvious to the rest of the heavyweight division, he's noticeably cleaned up his style and made himself a lot less risk adverse. And that type of Overeem poses a very, very, very tough challenge for Walt Harris. Rob Iman also pointing out Darren Till is now hitting up to 185. I believe earlier you suggested that Judko be the guy to welcome him there. Yeah, I guess that makes sense too. That it's kind of like when, yeah, I'm not mad at that. JDS versus Curtis Blades. That makes sense to me. That makes sense, I guess. Yeah, heavyweight is kind of a free for all now. with the looming presence of Francis Ngannou, it's kind of it's kind of a no man's land right now until we see what happens with Daniel versus Stipe. I don't really think any big moves are going to be made at heavyweight. All right, so I'm obviously very sleepy. I do have some writing I need to do, and it has been a long day. So I'm going to wrap this up. So go ahead, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Tell your friend to tell 10 friends. And you can follow me on Twitter at Ant Walker MMA. It's also my Instagram. So I got Good, Bad, and the Ugly, the post-fight column. That should be going live on Sherdog tomorrow. Ask Ant, my mailbag column. It should be live today. If not, maybe they're going to put it out tomorrow. But typically it comes out on Saturdays. I turned that in yesterday afternoon, so should be live. If not, look for that very soon. What else I got coming up? Off the Chain, the Sherdog panel discussion show. That will be the new episode of that will be premiering at noon West Coast time Tuesday afternoon. So go ahead and check that out. Replays, of course, will be available. We're also going to be simulcasting that on Facebook. So go to the Sherdog.com Facebook page and check that one as well. Let's see what else is coming up. I don't know what else is coming up. I think, oh yeah, my MMA on point stuff. I turned in a few scripts lately for MMA on point. I got one I got to write tomorrow too. So I've got a fair amount of videos that should be in the queue for MMA on point. So go ahead and stay tuned to that YouTube channel as well. You can also find the links to my MMA on point on videos, my Sherdog videos, and when I also on different playlists on this channel on the Walkout Network. So if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. And we can keep up the fight talk. So I'm gonna scan these the chat for just a little bit before we get up out of here. David Dirks, what's up, David? Asking what's next for Holloway. It's obviously Volkanovski. No one else makes sense right now. It's got to be Volkanovski. Oh, and before we even go about that, let's talk about Volkanovski's 37-hour journey from Australia to Edmonton to be a backup. How ridiculous was this? So this man took, he drove from like Sydney to Melbourne or vice versa, took a flight to Seattle, I think, and then a flight from Seattle to somewhere in Canada. Then he drove from there to Edmonton. And the whole time I'm just thinking, doesn't the UFC have a private jet? So go figure. But I did want to leave you guys with that one. Tommaso saying, have a good one. Congrats on the kid. Hope everything is good. Thank you, Tommaso. Baby and mother are doing quite well right now. Baby is growing. The stomach is showing. It is a surreal experience. I'm terrified. So there's that. Let's see what else. I'll stay cool on the West Coast tomorrow. It is hot as hell here. That's why you might hear my fan. You might hear traffic outside because I got the windows open. It is too hot to do any sort of broadcast. Just baking in an oven. So background noise be damned. Windows are open. Fan is on. Let's see what else we got. Pierce Hobb in the chat saying all champions are looking trash except Amanda. Oh my God, what are you watching? Did you not see Max Holloway do what he did today? Are you not anticipating Rob Whittaker versus Israel Adesanya? Pierce, come on, do better, my man. Do better, my man. The champions are looking like champions out here. Okay, everyone. So you know what to do. Like, subscribe, share, follow me on Twitter at Ant Walker MMA. Check out the work on Sherdog.com. Check out the work on MMA on Point. And please stay beautiful, stay positive, and through it all, you must stay sexy. I will see you when I see you. Peace.